I mean, you know.
Okay, welcome to the 4DMethod 4D user group. Today is May the 8th, 2019. Thanks for joining. Today on our agenda, we have, we'll talk a little bit about the user group. We'll get some news from 4D. We'll get the 4D iNug e-digest from Edgar Hammond. We'll do a segment that we've called What the Blog, where we review some of the recent articles in the 4D blog. We'll have our presenter, our special topic, 4D at Sweetwater Sound. This one goes to 11. There's a little Spinal Tap reference for those of you that are familiar with that. If not, worth a look up. But Joel Levy will be joining us to do the presentation. We'll have lots of questions and answers from Joel, and then we'll talk about the next meeting on July 13th. 2019. So my name is Brent Raymond, and again, this is the 4DMethod 4D user group. You can see our website at 4dmethod.com, where there's a wealth of resources and a library of information from all of our past meetings. And we can be reached at 4dmethod@gmail.com. Our intention is to try to bring together a scattered community of 4D developers and users. We stream all of the meetings via YouTube Live to allow people to participate from anywhere in the world. And it's been very exciting to see how many people have been able to take part from everywhere. We, again, record all of the meetings and presentations to be viewed again and shared with your friends and family. And our intention is to provide fresh new content and exposure for users and developers of 4D applications everywhere. New content, this slide not included. This one gets repeated. But anyways, for some actual new information, I'm going to kick it over to Jim and Donna at 4D to tell us a little bit about what's been going on in the world of 4D since our last meeting.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Thank you, Ed. Welcome to California. Donna and I are back in the San Jose office. So yeah, we're really looking forward to Joel's presentation on the Sweetwater Sounds 4D applications. As most of you know, that is our biggest single installation of 4D server with over 800 concurrent users. Sweetwater Sounds has always been one of our strongest 4D partners, and just a great group of developers and other people working there. We visited there several times, and we've always been welcome there. And now they are going to, a couple people from Sweetwater are going over to France next month for one of our meetings over there. So we're looking forward to that. Yeah, so the World Tour, I know you'll be talking about that, Brent, but yeah, last night was the final stop in San Jose. So that was a 2-day event, and we're just returning from that. And I want to thank all of you who attended any of the stops on the World Tour. We had close to 200 developers in the 6 cities where we presented. So that's about equal to a 4D summit if you put all those cities together. And we had a fantastic time. JPR, of course, our great friend, was with us, and he and Ad and Will just did some tremendous demonstrations. And I hope everyone enjoyed who attended. So Chicago, Boston, Atlanta. We had a new one in there, Austin, Texas, which was one of our most widely attended ones. So that was fantastic. We were kind of a nice surprise for us. And then we went up to Seattle and then finished back in San Jose at home. So that was great. Better attendance than last year. And like I said, close to 200 developers. But of course, the World Tour is not over. It's still going strong. Today we are in Belgium and in Sydney, Australia. So we keep getting internal pictures from the events there. I think Brent will talk about more about that too. So my takeaway from the World Tour, I love meeting developers face to face. It's the best part of my job. It's what I love about my job. Seeing what people are developing, what they're interested in, how business is going. Of course, the major points of interest for this World Tour were ORDA for sure, 4D for iOS, encryption and source control, just to name a few. But those seem to be the big topics people wanted to talk about. And finally was professional services. We got a lot of interest in deep code analysis, which is a new professional service for us, and quality assurance automated services. So we have a lot to follow up on after the world tour. It's great. So we just keep a lot of notes, and then we just contact the customers who were developers who were there and talk to them. So if you missed it, if you missed the world tour, you need to read the blog, because most of the information that we covered in the world tour will be coming up in V17R4 and V17R5, the latter of which is now in beta. So if you want to know some of the topics that we talked about, that's where to go. And that's about all I have for now. So I'll yield the rest of my time to Donna.
Oh, actually, you covered what I was going to talk about.
I did.
Yes,
okay.
you did. Jim, I think Jim secretly wants to go into marketing sometimes. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I give him a bad time all the time. I'm just really happy to be here, because I'm so excited about Sweetwater. So I just can't wait to hear the presentation.
All right.
Yeah.
Employees, just let me know.
She's a musician, so we have a lot of musicians in our office, and many of whom have bought instruments through Sweetwater, including my own daughter, who bought a banjo there. So it's a fantastic company. Which I will let you know.
A couple people in the Hangout, I'm sure, are recent customers as well.
I'm sure of that. Okay, Brent, so over to you. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks, Donna. Yeah, no, we're excited to see the presentation from Sweetwater as well, from Joel. Just a little bit, I thought I'd recap what I collected from the 4D World Tour here in Chicago, where most of the presentations were from AD and JPR. Of course, Jim shared a little bit of recent news and information from 4D as well, but the technical presentations were from these guys. And amongst the wealth of materials, I mean, I think it was 20-something different sample databases and components that they shared and went through over the couple days. But they reviewed some tricks that you could do in the interface for more complicated interfaces, and well, frankly, for simplifying more complicated interfaces. They went through advanced subform integrations, auto-generated and dynamic forms. Dynamic forms are a big part of 4D moving forward, where you can effectively create forms from code, or even store forms as JSON definitions on disk and load them runtime. In that direction, there was a component where you could convert a form to code and store it on disk, albeit. There's a component where there's a lightweight email editor, where it uses the new mail commands, which are really great. We've talked about that in previous meetings. Yeah, I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of refactoring in people's email code to take advantage of those new capabilities. We got a demo of the current state of 4D for iOS, which is exciting to see. Great progress being made there. They showed us a lot about how to use the form data, the new form variable form functionality for passing information into a form and retrieving it back out once data has been edited. And an in-depth demo of preemptive versus cooperative code, and sort of a review of best practices with preemptive coding. So yeah, I mean, it was a whirlwind of content, and frankly, it was great to see everybody at the World Tour and see what everyone was up to. Oftentimes, us developers get put in the back alley window with and don't get to to talk to other people in the industry in person very often. So events like this are a great opportunity to really see everyone and meet a few new people. So now I'm going to kick it over to the 4D iNug E Digest with our own Edgar Hammond, where he reviews some of the chit chat that's been happening online and on the Nug. So thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Brent. As always, we'd like to review what's happening on the iNug, because there's a wealth of knowledge out there and it's discussed on a daily basis. I'm particularly a digest reader, so I catch up when I can, usually on the train. But if you need to get in touch with the iNug, there's a link on the slide there that tells you how to get at stuff, and my summaries, which should be posted up on the 4DMethod website later on today. With that in mind, since the last time we had our discussion, a couple of hot topics were our code signing and Apple Notary Service. I don't know how many of you are moving forward with the most recent operating systems, but code signing and being able to verify the source of your code that's running is becoming a hotter topic for security. And so Canon Smith opened a subject, Apple Notary Service, which what's the difference between code signing and the notary service, and what does it take to get them done? At the same time, Pat Bensky had code signing works on one app but fails on another. And that thread covers the trials and tribulations of making code signing work. In mind, Julio Canero was looking for printing a PDF document from 4D, options for printing existing PDF documents. In other words, 4D is not producing the document, but knows where it's at and needs to print it. And that's got quite a long thread with many options ranging from plugins to LEP solutions for both Windows and the Mac environments. Jeff Kane let everybody know about a nice little surprise in the 64-bit of 4D V17, and his subject was PDF viewing alternative in V17 64-bit. Apparently there's a nice viewer built into the Blink engine, so if you are running 64-bit and 17, you may want to check out that feature. Keith Goebel has problems with Microsoft Print to PDF, and that thread went into problems with creating PDFs on Windows specifically, and highlights the difference between the 32-bit and 64-bit versions of 4D and how they interact with the PDF creation tools. And finally, Kirk, not Kirk Brooks, but Kirk, who goes by Rooftop 99, asked, how do you print out a structure diagram like we used to? For those of you who are newer to 4D, there used to be an option to print the graphic structure view straight out of 4D. And there are some solutions for that involving exporting to either HTML or XML and using some other tools from Miyako that will take that and turn it into an SVG diagram that can be printed with other means. Neil Schaefer is looking to install a new Windows server, and his question was benchmark speed test method, how to benchmark. And Steve Orth came up with an option using Microsoft disk speed. His argument is it's an independent test from Microsoft. It doesn't affect 4D at all. So if you can prove that there are problems with the disk outside of 4D, you're probably going to be able to put the blame somewhere else other than your own code. David Rose has an error connecting to 4D server. This thread involved tracking down network issues with 4D client server connections and lots of troubleshooting tips for doing that. About a day or two later, David Rose had a solution solved error connecting to 4D server. It seems like you have to watch out for changes forced by updates that are outside of your control. In his case, it was some sort of update from Windows, and that changed from static IP address to dynamic. So watch out when other things out of your control affect your server operating systems. There was a guy from the Art Institute, Ed Hammond, which was looking for advice on Windows server transitions. What are the best practice and advice? And I got some great responses from Jeff Kane and Tom Bennett on making the move from Mac to Windows for your servers and things to watch out for. Look to us in this space later for an update on how that process goes. Hopefully we'll take some good notes and be able to do a play-by-play for you. John DeSoy has 4D 17.1 network issues. Client disconnect errors after moving from 16.4 to 17.1. Lots of things to check with networks. I can relay some of our experience. We've had 2 network issues based on changes in the 4D environment. Our first was when we moved in to 17.2, I believe it was. We were using the new network layer, and apparently at some point, because we run a 64-bit server on the Mac OS, that was the recommended setup. Always run the new network layer. At some point, that advice has been removed. You can run the legacy network layer on a 64-bit server on Mac OS, and that solved our first problem. Later on, we've moved to 17R3 and suddenly had another network issue, which sort of manifested itself in printer timeouts. When we were trying to print something, people would immediately have a network problem following that. And we had to solve that by adjusting the client server settings. Since we are now on the legacy network layer, some settings that we had not looked at in at least 5 years had to be adjusted. So you're constantly tuning for best performance on your servers. Watch out for those things that you haven't looked at for a long time. And finally, Kirk Brooks gave us a tip on moving elements of a collection. So if you're interested in any of those topics, check out the eDigest page on the 4DMethod website, and you will get links to those threads. That's all I got.
Thanks, Ed. Yeah, there was a remark that there's no v17.2 release, but it was, yeah, I think it was R2, 17 R2. Regardless, yeah, you definitely want to be really careful with the network layer if you're running server client. You know, test out your performance and stability with the new network layer beforehand as much as possible, because some of the problems can be very touch and go, shall I say. Esoteric, mysterious. Mysteriously terrible. No, just, you know, it's nice when you can have some rock solid stability and you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. So just you know, be careful with the migrations if you're coming up from older versions. Oh, and one more topic, Ed mentioned that there was discussion about printing your structure. I don't know if any of you have seen Alexander Heintz's 4D Tidbits blog. He actually just put a post out today. I haven't even opened the demo yet, but where you can, with various different controls, see views of your structure and be able to generate graphics of the structure. So yeah, it's a nice blog. He's got some great tips in there and good code examples. Again, that's 4D Tidbits, Alexander Heinz. Hoping to get him on 4DMethod in one of the meetings one of these days to show off some of his other code. Anyways, thanks, Ed, for the review of what's been going on the NUG. And let's see, what do we have next? Yes, what the blog. So all of the topics that I'm going to be talking about, and as far as recent blog articles, are all in v17r5, which largely, well, it's not largely in beta. It is in beta. There's a lot of great features in R4, which is already released. But some of the most exciting stuff is coming out that that was talked about in the World Tour, and is some really huge advances for 4D. And I think probably leading up, I believe there's going to be an R6, but we're leading up to version 18 at this point. And so a lot of these are major additions that they're stabilizing for release with version 18. So one big one that I think was came from the privacy laws that were introduced in Europe, the GDPR per se. Worth a read if you're not familiar with it. But you can now have built-in data encryption at the table level. That is just awesome. So it's with a checkbox, you can encrypt individual tables, and it's really nice that they didn't make this feature where you're having to encrypt your entire database. You can pick and choose what needs to be encrypted, because there is some performance penalty given that it's unencrypting and re-encrypting on the fly. But that is just that's fantastic. All too often, I'm sure none of us are storing passwords in clear text anymore. However, this is a really nice way to take any sensitive data that you have to worry about people getting a hold of and have it encrypted all the time. So great feature. We saw a little bit of that at the tour. Improved performance for multi-threaded database access. There's always a kind of a at some point a single-threaded access to the bus, to the data bus. Apparently, they've been able to make some improvements on that, where 4 individual processes are manipulating records actively and can all operate individually on their own cores. That's great because, well, you're doing a lot of data processing then in multi-threaded fashion, and the data bus is single-threaded. That's going to be you're gonna not see as much performance as you wanted to, or you thought you might. Moving ahead with R5, it's 64-bit only from here on out. So if you haven't migrated all of your clients, if you're running any clients and your servers to 64-bit, well, you're going to have to. And now that they have dropped the 32-bit code support, they are updating a lot of their core libraries. OpenSSL, of course, that's for encryption, authentication, that kind of thing. Hunspell, their spell checking dictionary or framework. PHP, we're all familiar with that. ICU, what's that one? I think that's that is the Unicode library, Unicode support. It's got nothing to do with seeing you, but that's for the text Unicode in the applications. CEF 3626. Anybody? I forget what that one is. But and they're also ending certification for Windows 7 and 8.1. They're concentrating on Windows 10 moving forward. So this is a big step in support in the core libraries, and amongst other things we'll be talking about, just the fact that they've replaced all of those libraries. Test your applications before you release R5 live. Of course, it's still in beta, but these are some big core upgrades. Yeah, moving on. There's now object notation to handle files and folders. That is really nice, actually, for any of us who've done a lot of file and folder manipulation, creating files and folder trees and that kind of thing. That can all be handled in object notation. So before it's even written to disk, which is just really neat. Be interesting to see how memory is handled when manipulating large amounts of data. But I'm sure that they are working their way through any issues with that for us. But that's a very nice change. As far as Orda goes, we're all Orda newbies here, given that it just came out. But they have some performance optimization in client server mode. So to be said, 2 to 3 times improved LAN performance and up to 30 times faster in WAN. Wow, that's nice. And that is out of the box with R5. New query settings. There's a new query settings parameter for query and for several other commands which actually access records. For one, it's named placeholders so that you can have more complicated query strings. Named placeholders, well, for values and for attribute paths. And one that I'm really excited about is the context. So what it does in Orda is there is a under the hood optimization for what data gets retrieved from the server and client server. And so 4D effectively uses its machine learning, artificial intelligence, and many other tasty things to find out, to try and optimize what information needs to come back from the server. And with the new context query setting, you can basically keep track. You can allow it. You can take that context, that optimization, the learning that it did on a previous query, and effectively feed it into the next query, so it doesn't have to go through that process of predicting what data needs to be retrieved from the server. So if you're doing very many queries or record accesses in a loop, you can record that, and it'll save an immense amount of processing client server. So that's nice. I'm excited to use that, and I have a feeling I'll be doing some testing with that with R5 as soon as I start doing some Orda with it. Also, just a huge new thing with R5. It's still an alpha phase in R5. In fact, I believe with the full release of R5, they're going to remove it and continue beta testing it with R6. But the 4D project database structure format. So this is a huge open door into using source control with 4D, which has always been a concern, shall I say, a request from the developer community. The ability to take a full legacy large code set and use source control like stuff like GitHub in order to control changes and revert and branch your code. and all those nice things for working in an agile manner and organized development process. So now it's going to be, again, possible, albeit with V18. But what you'll find when you convert your 4D structure into a project is everything gets represented now into individual text files, including methods, project methods, object methods, menus, the structure itself, forms, form objects. Everything now is going to be saved individually as text files, which is great. Wonderful thing to see. However, be careful with your testing and beta testing of this feature, as there is no way to bring a project back into a 4DB. So it's a one-way road. But it's fun to see what the future looks like with that. Okay, all right. Well, that's the blog, and now I'm going to welcome joining us from Fort Wayne, Indiana, Joel Levy. He's a software engineer with Sweetwater. He's new to the 4D programming community, but I think you'll be seeing a lot of him in coming years, and that's a good thing. I met him personally at the recent 4D World Tour in Chicago. That's one of the great things about attending these outings is not only catching up with old friends and colleagues, but also meeting some of the new folks in person. I was immediately impressed by his energy and engagement with development and learning about all the new features in the language. I don't have any real numbers to back this up, but from what I can see at 4D gatherings like the World Tour and the Summit, most developers are, shall I say, not young. But Joel has youth on his side, a recent degree in computer science, and experience at Sweetwater, the biggest client-server installation of 4D in the world, as far as I know. Today he'll be introducing us to Sweetwater, how they use 4D, and his experience learning 4D and getting up to speed with their growing development team there. So welcome, Joel, to 4DMethod, and look forward to your presentation.
Thank you so much, Brent. Really happy to be here. Really happy everybody's interested to see what I have to say. Let me share my screen.
Ooh,
and let's get this going. Can everybody see the presentation okay?
Yep.
Great. Well, 4D at Sweetwater, I'm sure as we all know, this application definitely does go to 11, and this probably has to be the most used joke at Sweetwater too. I'm sure every sales engineer, when they sell an amp, they all go to 11. I would hope so, at least. So before we get into the Sweetwater application itself, I want to talk about the history of Sweetwater and the impact we've had on the Fort Wayne community. So in 1979, we were founded by our current CEO, Chuck Surak, and it started off as a mobile recording studio, actually. He worked out of a VW bus back when 4-track recorders were the size of a washing machine, and we couldn't fit them in our pockets. And he was recording local bands and making a name for himself, and slowly found the need for a music retailer and provider for musicians and pro audio technicians around the country. And thus Sweetwater was born. Grew out of the van into a basement, out of a basement into a dedicated house, finally onto our 44-acre campus in Fort Wayne, Indiana. This is a shot of Sweetwater during GearFest. There are often many cars, but not this many cars. And the tents in the back in this direction is where our employee parking lot. And during GearFest time, that gets filled up with tents, filled with vendors showing off gear, and of course, thousands and thousands of customers. I believe we had around 13 to 14,000 people in attendance last year, and we're expecting that to be an even greater number this year. Here is a horrible picture that I should have thought about a little more before taking, but this is a little history museum right inside the entrance of Sweetwater. Not the actual VW bus, but a good recreation of it, and a lot of the recording gear that he would have been using at the time, and a lot of gear that made Sweetwater what it is by selling it to other pro audio musicians. My break room, the guitar room, this is always filled with customers and employees alike trying out new gear, probably bothering a few of the employees, but this is just a small part of the retail store, my favorite part of the retail store. We have a slide. You'll see that pictured on the right. A whole lot of fun. I don't know why, but it's so much fun telling people that we have a slide on campus, and a massive diner that people outside of Sweetwater use a lot. There's a lot of older communities who come in and play cards, or just have meetings, or community outreach programs have meetings in our larger conference halls. But the diner is just a great place for everybody to get together, meet other people about the company, and enjoy food from our amazing diner. Here's a quick shot of the warehouse. This is an older picture of the warehouse, and it's really hard getting good shots of the warehouse because things are just always constantly changing. We're actually disconnecting our warehouse, and it'll still be on site, but it'll be a much larger facility, disconnected from the main business office building, and the current warehouse will become office space as we continue to grow. Just a cool part about Sweetwater, underneath the same roof are Sweetwater Studios. This is a killer live room, and the connected control room is nearby with windows for line of sight. We can see dedicated isolation rooms back here. So, very famous people have recorded in the studios. You can check out the Sweetwater Studios website for a list of those, and you can hear some of the work they've made. So outside of the Sweetwater building, Sweetwater is given back to the community in many, many ways, with other businesses deemed the Sweet family of businesses. The Sweetwater Performance Pavilion, you may have seen it at the background of the first picture, but a really great spot to see a concert right there on Sweetwater's campus. Super convenient, super reasonable prices, and actually pretty cool names. Slash is touring and will be at the Sweetwater Performance Pavilion this summer, I believe in August. If you're a fan, maybe come out and take a peek. Furthermore, some of the more crazy ones, Sweet Aviation and Sweet Helicopters. We do training and helicopter chartering services. Kind of related back to music, we acquired MyNet Music. I've been around since the early 1900s in Fort Wayne, doing a lot of orchestra instrument repair and rentals. Sweet Cars is a luxury car dealer. Sometimes the Sweetwater parking lot can look like a Sweet Cars dealership. It looks a lot of nice cars there. And finally, the Clyde is a medium-sized venue. It's a revamped movie theater. It's been around Fort Wayne a long time. And Chuck and Lisa Sirac, revamped the Clyde to what it is today. State-of-the-art sound, a really great venue, and they actually just opened up a small restaurant in there if you want to grab a drink or a bite before the show. So we talked about a little bit underneath the roof that is Sweetwater in the first picture. Here are our core departments. Sales is the heart blood of Sweetwater, I would say. The Sweetwater customers here in this call and listening abroad know that you have a dedicated person on the inside that you can contact by phone, email, by any means, actually text message now. And they'll help you from everything from picking the right guitar strings to every single cable and compressor and piece of outboard gear you would need to make the most state-of-the-art studio. And all our customers are treated equally. If you're a 15-year-old kid trying to buy your first guitar, or a very seasoned, famous musician. And of course, all that's related to the warehouse. The 4D application is maintaining inventory control and ordering quantities to make sure if items can be automatically ordered to get put on a purchase order to the manufacturer. It's just all intertwined together. Merchandising are the people making sure we have proper quantities, keeping in contact with manufacturers, and actually getting a lot of private stock Sweetwater exclusive gear. You'll see it's popular with a lot of retail distributors or music distributors to have like maybe a unique finish of a guitar, or maybe a special guitar pedal that's only unique to that manufacturer. And Sweetwater's thankfully very thankful to have many exclusive items from manufacturers. We do a lot of communication with the 4D application and the marketing team, because the marketing team is where the developers who maintain the website live. So there's always going to be interdepartmental communication with them, and we're constantly seeking new technologies to do that. I'll talk about the Google PubSub platform. That's later on. That's something we're implementing now. And just going over the rest, business offices, normal accounting, they're mostly using 4D for reporting, service and tech support, and guitar operations. Every guitar that we ship out gets physically inspected personally by one of the guitar technicians. They're doing a tuning, a setup, and a polish and wipe down to make sure that the guitar is going to be pristine when it gets to your hands. Guest services and reception, making sure our customers get routed to the right person if they're going to service, or maybe directly to their sales engineer. And the last few aren't they're under the Sweetwater roof, but they're a little bit disconnected. They don't use 4D, the Academy, and the Studio, but these are just two really amazing services that Sweetwater offers. The Academy is full of highly trained and extremely professional guitar teachers. I took lessons with a local college professor actually through the Academy at Sweetwater. Just a really great opportunity to get one-on-one experience with a professional. And obviously the diner and maintenance and facilities, keeping everything together, clean, making sure everything's working right. So we should look at the one department glossed over, and that is the Sweetwater MIS department. Probably should be named IT now, but maybe I think it'd be a little too hard to rename all our hard-coded values everywhere, even outside of 4D. So the MIS team is comprised of 4 main groups: the network operations team, and they do a lot more than just the network operations. They're doing all the hardware around Sweetwater, keyboard replacements, workstations, any TV you see floating around, and of course the 4D server. The business operations and data analytics is a newer group. They're headed by Jeremy Edwards, and he came on. So this department started about 2 years ago when I came on as an intern. Unrelated events. This is how I have to piece together the timeline. And they're bridging the gap between the developer and the end user. And the data analytics portion of that, they do a lot of reporting with third-party applications like Domo, some in-house PHP scripts and web pages that end users can go and acquire the information they need without doing long SQL queries. And that interacts with the 4D team the most in the business operations side, with getting specs, setting deadlines with the end user, and making sure, no feature creep, nobody's sneaking in any last minute details. The special operations team is pretty interesting. They've been deemed the oddballs a few times, but Spec Ops is a little bit cooler if you ask me. And we actually maintain our own internal ticket system where the business operations team can help schedule tickets for build cycles. And a build cycle is just a chunk of time that the developers use to develop new code, code review that code, test the code, and deploy the code. And so we're on a 2-week cadence. So every other Tuesday, code goes live, and just making sure end users understand that what's going to go live, the capacity of what they can do when it goes live, all that's wrapped up in the ticket system. And I would actually like to take a peek at that now. So this is all made in-house, and this is kind of my dashboard. So we see BC 1921. We are in the 21st Julian week, build cycle 2019. So everything in the green here is kind of my effort for the next 2 weeks starting yesterday. And furthermore, the 2 weeks after that, marked 23, the 2 weeks after that marked 25th, and then some unassigned tickets that I should probably get scheduled on a build cycle. Jeremy probably shouldn't see those. But looking inside of a ticket, when you update it with a comment, the customer, who is just going to be an end user of 4D, will get notified. So here's, they want the manufacturer added on this line. So this was a ticket I wrote. Any updates I give to the ticket, John Lewick will get notified. And this is actually how we do our code review. So when all the code is set, we have a release version for 4D set. We have these special flags to make sure that the end user understands, what's going to be changing, and then a little release note. So the code review process goes as follows. You provide your code, you set your code ready for code review, you send it over to another developer, and they'll actually go into the 4D database and look over your code, hopefully be testing your code and ensuring everything's good. This checks and balances are something we're always constantly trying to improve. But the code review process has saved me time and time again. I really enjoy. I want to say enjoy. I really get a lot out of getting rejected on code reviews, sometimes for something that was just blatantly wrong and wouldn't have worked, or an opportunity to learn a better style of doing something. And the senior developers have been amazing throughout that whole process. Matt Houghton Thompson and Derek Bennett, if you guys are familiar. So a little bit more on Spec Ops. They also do a lot of internal web applications outside of the ticket system. Any web form we might need just for, say, a GearFest vendor registration for customers that takes place in 4D. But any oddball jobs that might require a website or something outside of 4D will probably go to the Spec Ops team. And finally, the 4D team, why we're here today. Here is your developers and everybody wrapped up in 4D at Sweetwater. Matt Houghton Thompson constantly ruining great formatted slides. Dylan Hansen is no longer with us. He was an intern that I was working closely with. We'll talk about him a little more later and that process. And outside of the developers here, we have Kyle Snyder and John Barrett. John Barrett is a senior. Sweetwater has been around for about, I think he's in his 21st year now. And he is a dedicated quality assurance tester. So he uses an automated testing application called Squishy, which I believe is integrated with Python. I haven't talked to him a whole lot about that, but it's really cool to watch his application move the cursor around testing our 4D application. And he's also doing, more in-depth testing to make sure everything's working as expected before we release. And Kyle Snyder is our help desk. So all the tickets before they come through, instead of the ticket going directly to the developer, Kyle can take a first stab at it, see if it's something like a user privilege that he can fix, or he can be the one to train the end user on the process or notify management if it's a larger issue. So Kyle's great, always interacting with him, and he used to work in service, so he has been a great resource while I work on tickets related to the service department. And John's worked in every facet of the company over the years, and he's just a powerhouse of knowledge over everything. Both musicians, both talk to them a lot about that too. So a little bit about me. I often get confused with Sideshow Bob and Kenny G. Just wanted to get that out of the way now. I'm not either of those people. I am a Fort Wayne native, though. I attended Bishop Dwenger High School, if anybody's familiar. Soon after, I went to Ball State and got a degree from computer science. Ball State's an interesting place. A lot of references to Muncie, Indiana, and Parks and Rec. If you go to Ball State, the first thing it'll tell you is they're notable alumni of David Letterman and Jim Davis, the Garfield creator. Maybe me after this presentation. Maybe I can get put on a short list.
There you go.
So every summer I was home from Ball State in Fort Wayne. I worked at Sweetwater. My first 2 summers, I worked in the warehouse as general outbound operations and a lot of inventory control. And it was a really unique opportunity. I worked closely with upper management in the warehouse to find my position over the summer, because they definitely don't get they get a lot of summer help. So finding the right role for the right person is a little tough. And thankfully I could work closely with management there. And got involved with a small team like inventory control and learned a lot about 4D that way. Because at the same time, I was learning about databases at school. So a lot of thinking while I was counting inventory. So thankfully, later on, I talked to Jason Johnson, the vice president of IT. And he was vice president at the time, head of IT, best way to reference him. I sat down with him for a lunch and talked about internships, and I applied the summer later, sent in a resume, and I was an IT intern for the next summer instead of working in the warehouse. And my IT internship, I wanted to talk about a little more later, but a lot of it was doing what I do today, just constantly learning about 4D and implementing small bug fixes and enhancements. I graduated in May of 2018, and just about a week after graduation, I came on full-time at Sweetwater. From the end of my internship to the start of full-time, I worked remotely from Ball State for about 10 hours a week. So I was never disconnected for 4D for about 2 years now. So let's get into the 4D application itself at Sweetwater. Maybe not the best branding on this one. It definitely gets a little bit confusing when discussing 4D with fellow computer scientists and developers, especially in the context of Sweetwater, because we just refer to it as 4D. And then when we're actually talking about the language and platform, we're still talking about 4D and just got to be specific. So I wanted to start off with the server specs. Pretty grandiose numbers. I've never seen numbers this high in any machine I've touched, but I guess that's what you get for this being your first job at such a large installation of 4D. 768 gigs of RAM. That's probably 5 Chrome tabs and Slack, and probably a 4D server too. Obviously, a 64-bit OS. We're just posted a lot about bugs we found in the 64-bit upgrade process, and I'm glad to hear that those are making its way to you guys, and that we can be a part of the 4D community. So the 4D CRM was implemented in the late 90s, I believe, 98, 99, and a lot of the application is built and maintained by Derek and Matt referenced in the last slides. Whenever we're looking at the code base, it's either they made it or they refactored it at one point, and there's so much code that they've touched that they don't remember it all. But it's great to have such great resources on site to learn not only about the 4D platform, but the Sweetwater 4D application. So the core modules are names, invoices, and inventory, and I would like to show those real quick. This is our development environment, not trying to mess anything up. A little splash screen for the developers so we can get into the back-end user mode if we need to. So names is where we store all of our customer information. And dev is a little slow, and I'm over VNC as well. So traversing through these might be a bit slow. And again, this is all dev data. But this is how we track communications with customer, their communication preferences. We know, if they're into recording, guitar, whatnot. Related to GDPR changes, if they can accept calls and texting, and just general communication and anything we would need to know about a customer here. So given a customer can then be written an invoice. And this is just a place where we can provide inventory and customer information to get gear to the customer, obviously. And the reason these three modules are so important is because they're so tightly wound together. Because we want to sell a customer our inventory, and this is a way we can browse all of our inventory. This window is a little bloated. There's different views depending on different what department you're in. Obviously, merchandising is going to want more information about a product than, say, a sales engineer, because if a customer's already decided what they want, and the sales engineer just needs to know about quantity and getting it on an invoice, then they might not necessarily need all of that information. So we provide different views of the inventory application. And we can create an invoice, process it, and that's where the whole outbound process starts. An invoice gets printed in the warehouse, and then the pick session starts, and the rest is history. It's I would like to say it's that easy, but there's a lot in between, and I don't think we have time to get into the nitty-gritty of everything there. So you obviously saw that there are other windows here, and these are used by everybody else in the company, and I'm sure they're getting used by the sales team a lot too. Quotes is just another place that we can write up good-looking outbound quotes, estimates on tax and shipping, give those to customers as they need be. Looks very similar to invoices, but just make sure that we're not going to be allocating inventory, reserving serial numbers of certain guitars. We don't want to do all that. We want to be able to sell all our inventory, even if we're just getting an estimate for a customer. Service orders is another big one. That's what the service department is using to track repairs and returns with customers. And you could take a peek. There's just a lot going on here. But at its core, names, invoices, and inventory is the heart and soul of the 4D application. So we'll glance. I already talked about this a little bit, but these are all the departments using 4D. The retail store, pulling inventory and getting it to customers immediately. And the interesting one is the diner. We actually have a checkout that we use. We can just swipe our badges and it comes right out of our paychecks, and that touchscreen interface is all controlled by 4D. So some unique features that I wanted to show you guys. Again, I've never worked in a 4D application before, and these are things that tools that we've implemented for developers that I wanted to talk about. I'm not sure if they're features that anybody else has implemented, but user scripts is a way that we can run code in a live production environment without while remaining in compiled mode. So designer lists is something that only the developers have access to. So we can simply come in here and make a new user script record. We can enable it just for particular users to use. So even though only developers can make a user script, maybe there's an end user who says like, hey, every so often I have to do, a clear of an evaluation date in a table. Well, I can just make them a little user script and they can run it when need be, instead of writing a new ticket for a developer to take care of that. So we can just write code like we would expect here. And this is just a text editor form. We don't need to run through this. I'm embarrassing myself trying to type and talk at the same time.
Live coding.
So once that is submitted, we can access that through an extra menu. Do not click. What does this do? I think it says you're a cool guy, Joel. That's a good one. That's somebody wrote that. Really appreciate that. So just a great way. It's great for little bug fixes without impacting the whole company by bringing the 4D server down and doing minor updates. I'm getting a little bit of echo through somebody.
How are the user scripts implemented? Are you using how do you actually implement those? You know?
I don't personally. I should have looked into it a little bit more. I believe there's a method execute on client or execute code.
Or is there a place where the scripts are listed in the user's menus? No.
Like if I was a normal end user.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the scripts that you have enabled for you show up in that extra. So these are all the scripts enabled for me. A retail AR report. Thankfully, I put in a description for this one. It sends a report to the current user. Here's one that resends a particular email. Just great little tools, but I don't know exactly how we implemented it in the back end.
I see.
But that data is just stored in a table and executed somehow.
Cool.
I can provide a little more information for you after the fact. The batch clients are just our client machines that are used to both run all the time or run particular code at just a certain time. So say every day at 8 p.m. I want to query invoices and see all the unprocessed invoices and email that to somebody. That's something that we would put onto a batch task. All these are managed in the same place for developers. And we have a number of these that do a number of different things. They get way more complicated than that. But one example that I use it for, is GearFest registration. So this runs all the time. It starts at midnight and goes till a second before midnight. But my code is set up in such a way that every time the code runs, it'll sleep for an hour with a delay process. And while that the batch client waits until the process starts again, and it pulls messages from PubSub, which is just kind of like a middleware. We use it to transmit JSON objects between the web marketing team, like a form that an end user would fill out, and us storing it into a 4D table. So every hour, this method that I have runs on a batch client machine and will download the code or download the JSON and put it into a table as need be. We have batch clients that just do database updates, so we can run like little methods. Say you have a lot of code saved in an on-save event and we don't want to bog down the user at that time. If it's running a lot of queries or doing a lot of updates, we can make a DB update, to a database update, to say like, hey, this is what the user wants this field set to. At a future date, when it's less, when it won't impact the end user, we can set the. That's not a very good example. Let me track one down. Okay. So let's say, for example, we need to update the web team's items table with information from our table. So there's going to be a lot of items with a lot of updates, and we don't want to do the update on the end user's client as soon as they do the save. If it's going to take 2 minutes to query all the tables, get the information, do the processing we would need to before we do the actual push, that is something we want to put off to a batch client as to not bog down the end user. Another cool one are switches, and these are just Booleans that we can control on the fly. So we will wrap a code in a if statement that looks something like this. Is the font big enough for everybody here?
It's always good to make it bigger.
Okay.
There you
Cool. So don't mind the other code, but these statements are as easy as follows. So that any code I would not want to run this code would only run if this switch is enabled. And we manage these switches in the same place that we saw before. And then some sort of name to track it. And we'll enable this only for me, meaning this statement will only evaluate true if I'm the current user, or we can enable it for everybody. So this will be true as long as that the switch is enabled. So really great for keeping people out of certain functionality that you added for, say, beta testing or just privileges in general. But every time this method is called, it is doing a database query. So there's always the constant competition of having as few switches as possible because we just don't want that many dependencies. Definitely great for an initial release and testing to make sure that if something does go wrong, we can disable code in a production environment. Saved me plenty of times over, and I wish I would implement it more often. Would have saved me a few times. And finally, the SQL window. I don't know who on our team developed this, but this is just a great way for end users and developers alike to interact with our databases with a structured query language instead of accessing everything with 4D queries. And I don't know where I put the window. Cool. So about what you would expect, we have all our tables listed on the side with the individual fields for reference and their types. And we can just run basic queries on both the mirror of production we have, production itself, and unchecked is just going to query our dev database. So 4.9 million names records in dev right now. Again, not all of those are active customers, but one names record for every customer we have had. So the SQL window is great. Our BAs of the business analytics team, they really like using this because they're doing a lot of queries, and it just saves them having to learn the 4D language just to extrapolate data with a program they already know. Oops. I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what I did to get in here. I guess we can proceed. My apologies.
No worries.
So we can talk about a few notable projects I've worked on with our 4D application over the years. We talked about the GDPR compliance, and as soon as I came on full time, this was a hot topic. So we were sure to implement that. I don't know if we were actually going to get fined or anything, but we just needed to be compliant, and I had to implement that, being able to delete past phone calls and wiping customer information, and being able to extrapolate customer information and send that to the end user. And a similar note, Proposition 65, California compliance, all those stickers that say this product is known to cause cancer in the state of California or something like that. We just needed a way to be able to associate a warning with items, with all the items of a particular manufacturer, or just a single particular item with a particular warning. We've talked about GearFest a lot. I'm absolutely crazy about GearFest. I love it every single year. It's 2 days of a lot of hard work, but we all suffer together, all the employees at Sweetwater, and we get a lot out of it, seeing a lot of customer satisfaction. And with this GearFest registration, I've talked about the Google PubSub platform, which is just a great middleware that we've used to communicate with the other programmers under our roof. And it's so great just downloading the JSON file, making an object out of that, and then having a collection of objects that I can use a for each loop on with dot notation. It's super readable. It was really easy to get the PubSub API working in 4D. And once I downloaded the messages, it was really easy with dot notation and collections to manipulate that data and get it into a 4D table. I also made the guitar setup wizard, which is a window that provides the sales engineer opportunity to get information about a customer and how they would like their guitar set up. So for the guitar nerds out there, rest assured, you can specify not only your tuning, but down to the 64th of an inch, how high you want your strings off of the frets. And this information is really important, not only for the sales engineer and the customer, but the tech doing the setup, making sure that the guitar is going to be exactly how the customer wants it. And I was really excited to work on that project, being a guitar player myself. Saved the headaches of communicating guitar terms with the guitar people requesting the project. And I just had a lot of fun with that one and continue to update it and make it the best I can. I put manufacturer series sub-series on here. This was a little window I made. Maybe not the best UI, but I was extremely happy to be able to implement collection controlled list boxes, which was something I took to as soon as it was an option. So both of these list boxes are controlled with collections, and this form is actually controlled with a form object. And I was really worried about this project, getting it implemented quickly. But with those two new features, which were released and I had practiced with a little bit before this project was assigned to me, made this project super, super easy. So very thankful to form objects and collections, and especially collection controlled list boxes. Saved me time and time again. And in an effort to cut down on the amount of emails we send to ourselves to track errors, I made a Slack method that we can send Slack messages to a particular channel. And I know this is used by a lot of other people, and Slack provides great pipelines to send to specific channels, but I wanted to make a method that gave the end user the flexibility. So maybe they want to, bug all the 4D devs. They can send it to our 4D dev communication channel. But what I've been using it for is just specific errors. So I have a GearFest registration error channel that if there's an error in downloading messages, I get notified of it. Thankfully, I haven't had many notifications there, only during my testing. But it's a great option to have without bogging down our email server. So to get a little bit into my history with 4D, especially Sweetwater, I had a 90-day summer internship that started off with 2 days of reading an old 4D manual. And I was talking with Brent earlier when we were practicing this. I don't remember what version we concluded. It was either like 12 or 14. Either way, Jeff Kane gave this to me and explained, look, I'm not giving this to you so you learn the actual language. I just need you to understand the concepts of 4D, because going through relational data based classes and just general programming classes and algorithms at school, it didn't really hit on the whole, suite of tools that you can make your own form in here. And here's how selections work. And you can save a set and all the database operations that you can do and how you do that programmatically. So that was a great introduction to the platform itself and learning how to think better in 4D, not just the language itself, understanding how 4D handles data and how it wants you to manipulate data. So that manual is super great for that. And then obviously the training videos and the documentation. There are the self-training videos out there. They're, I don't know, maybe one version old. And while as we've over the years trained people, we've given helpful tips like, hey, we want you to implement a list box here. That's going to be a more useful tool that you're going to be using around the application, not only making new ones, but maintaining the ones that exist. And just constantly having support from the guys around me saying like, hey, here are the self-training videos, but maybe concentrate more on these. And that definitely starts off with making forms and loading up records from a table that you make and messing around in the structure. And while making just small applications, not connected to the 4D application at all, you're obviously browsing the docs and the forums. And, I'm talking to Jeff Kane a lot, and I'm sure he got bothered by many of my questions early on, but better questions than noon structures. So self-training aside, I quickly got into like smaller projects and bug fixes. And, a bug may seem simple on the surface, but you get into it, the code might be old and a little bit dirty, and you end up learning not only a lot about the 4D application that Sweetwater maintains, but the 4D platform as a whole, and maybe how somebody would solve a problem if they were using, say, V12 or 13 of 4D when a particular chunk of code was written. And I'll get into a little more about that with a slide in the future. But it was really great to be making real changes. I got to go home and know I made a difference in somebody's day with a skill that I had never previously been able to like express. You can do so many school projects, but you don't get the satisfaction out of using that skill of programming to make somebody's day a little bit easier. And I got a lot of satisfaction out of that during my internship, and I still do to this day, especially with larger projects. So the initial struggles of learning 4D was that I couldn't just Google how to make a for loop or how to iterate through an array. I couldn't do the simple things of just learning the language that I would do with another language. I couldn't go on YouTube and find 30 playlists of how to program, say, a Reddit bot in Python, or make a simple texting application in Java. So a lot of questions to the senior developers, Jeff Kane too, and a lot of reading 4D documentation and just looking at the code that was out there and learning from it. Unfortunately, sometimes looking at old code, you develop bad habits that that I now see and are actively trying to break out of, using process variables when there are just better alternatives now, especially with forms. It's the biggest one. Just so many forms used to have so many process variables, and now with form objects, there's just so many better ways to handle it. So it's always a constant struggle of, keeping track of how it was done in the past and refactoring it so it works well and will continue to work well into the future. Documentation is always a constant struggle with us. There was a time where it wasn't super necessary because everybody who needed to know everything about the application knew about it. It was Matt, Derek, their manager, Mike, and maybe a few other people who had worked on the application before. And it just put a little bit of a burden on me to learn about all these things and have a higher understanding of them, because some high level concepts in the 4D application, our Sweetwater specific one, aren't super clear. Like, say, the allocation process of, we have one item, but we have a customer in the store at 2 p.m. who wants that item, but a customer online ordered it 2 hours ago. So there's a lot of considerations. Does the nearby warehouse have this in stock? When is the next shipment ready? Is the customer particular about what serial number they want? Just a lot of complications that weren't super documented. So learning about those along with the 4D application was both fun and a little bit stressful. And that has turned into documenting these workflows for future developers and for us, because I might not understand how I did my PubSub implementation in a year. I looked at my guitar setup wizard that I did as an intern and refactored all of it because I didn't do it as well as I could have. And it's been fun, to say the least, learning about 4D's past and seeing how we could refactor that to, make 4D the future. So I'm in a unique position where, because I was an intern, I closely feel for the fellow interns, and I hope that they can learn from my mistakes, and they can learn from my experiences. And this goes outside of just interns. It applies to onboarded employees. So we recently hired David Vorel. He came on. Well, I think he's been here, I don't know, a little less than a year, maybe a year, but very similar circumstances to me. Degree from informatics from IU, worked a few jobs before, and never seen the 4D platform before, but has programming experience. So it's kind of just sitting down like, hey, the same thing Jeff did with me, but obviously Jeff has a lot Jeff has a lot more important tasks to do than teaching a college kid how to make a for loop in 4D. He needs to be maintaining the server and keeping track of tickets that he's working on and whatnot. So I took it upon myself to work as a little bit of an onboarding position, helping new employees get used to not only the Sweetwater campus, but the 4D platform, and showing them the tricks of the trade. We actually had a high school intern from a career center that we have in Fort Wayne. It's just you go for your half of your high school day, and the other half of your day is spent at your home school. Not your homeschool, meaning the school that they would go to if they didn't go to this program. Not that they are homeschooled. Some of them are. I went through this program through a computer repair program. They didn't offer programming classes at the time, but now they do. So we had a programming intern for a few months, and he hadn't been exposed to a whole lot of programming languages or a whole lot of programming experience. Just an introduction to topics through a book and a few projects. So it was really interesting teaching the 4D concepts, of selections and database relations, many-to-one relationships, one-to-many, teaching those skills alongside new programming skills. Because I initially when I was learning for loops, I've talked about it a lot. It took me a while to understand. It took a teacher to write it out on a board, show me, an iterator, it goes up by 1 every time, exactly what's going on. And it was a cool opportunity to explain all these concepts in the context of 4D and relational databases and our application, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in our application. We're working with really interesting customers with unique skills and talents, and a lot of, I'm biased obviously, and a lot of cool gear, and it's just a unique opportunity to work with cool data. And it definitely piqued my interest in not only 4D, but just database development as a whole. And I know in my experience, I was a TA in college, and for the introduction computer science class, which was almost all Python, I learned more about not just programming concepts in general, maybe not specific nitty gritty things, but more thinking like a programmer and thinking through things and troubleshooting and debugging, not by going through all these classes, but by being on the front lines, working with students one-on-one, especially students brand new to the field of computer science. And it was kind of fun, a little bit stressful reliving that experience while having to maintain the expectations of, being a full-time software engineer. But I really have a passion about teaching people not only about computer science, but here at Sweetwater about 4D. So we do have 2 college level summer interns coming on. I'm really excited to get hands-on with them. I believe they come on the 20th. Normally for our onboarding, we'll do the same things that were done for me, reading documentation and doing demo applications. And we actually have a little bit of a structured application we like them to make, some sort of contact manager. And we let them have free reign. They work on it for maybe 1 day or 2 days if we have more time. And the main goals are to implement a list box, implement some sort of printing using an external web API. And normally that manifests itself with like a Google Maps displaying the address in a web area, or doing directions, or like zip code validation. And those are the 3 main things we want to see them implement, on top of the creativity. What else they add, other APIs they might find, other little 4D tools they might implement, just to get them exposed to 4D before we set them off free in our development environment. So with the intern no longer there, And before I get new interns, my day-to-day is definitely a lot more bug fixes, enhancements. All those tickets will be done in the next 2 weeks, hopefully. And if you were peeking at those tickets earlier, a lot of them are focused on the service and tech support area. All the developers kind of have their areas of focus, but we all have to know and touch all parts of the application. But I've noticed recent trend in working with service tech support in specifically the guitar operations department. And my interest and love of music really shows itself when I get to make, cool little windows or improve somebody's day-to-day in the service department, tech support department, or the whole company of Sweetwater. There's a floor of hundreds of sales engineers just talking to the customer, and anything I can do to make their job a little bit easier, to make the end customer's day a little bit better when they get that guitar and plug it into their new amp. It's really satisfying. I'm extremely lucky to have been exposed to 4D and such a grand install, and I wouldn't know how to handle another application. The stress can be definitely motivating and fun, but sometimes those Monday nights, like, are my switches enabled? Is all my code in line? Did I send it for code review? Definitely feel the high intensity that comes with having such a large server, a single server installment of 4D. But it's all I know, so it's hard for me to elaborate on that. That's the end of my presentation, but I would love to take any questions, and I can expand on any thoughts over.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. That's I think that's the truth. You definitely got thrown into the deep end of 4D application development, but you've got a great crew there to work with to learn and learn the how things have been done in the past, and you're actually jumping in at a great time as far as the evolution of 4D as a language and an environment goes, because with the advent of Orda and object-based data structures and whatnot, they're at a time where so much is about integration anyway. So it's those features being aimed directly at integration. You can take the helm and really drive integration of those new features. Yeah.
And especially being such a young department, a healthy balance of a lot of the 4D experience and people fresh out of school. We saw Orda and we saw the dots, and we just implemented them immediately in a for each loop. Just as soon as we saw it, we all went hog wild and used it wherever we could. I'm still using it. It makes a lot of these newer features I didn't know I needed until I looked at a lot of the old code that we're using in 4D. Just by nature of the beast, we can't update every single line of code, no matter how bad we want to.
Right. That's always, there's always a balance there. As Thomas Mowell said, when somebody asked him, well, should all of this be rewritten in Orda? No, don't go home and do that. But it can be tempting.
I see Kirk asking about my reference to refactor a lot, and I guess that's a subject I took to from a professor from school I liked a whole lot, and it ties in closely to test-driven development. I don't develop in a test-driven mindset as much as I should, but I definitely take a lot of those ideologies to heart, and one of them is red-green refactor, that you write enough code to fail, that being red, to get some sort of compiler error. And then you write enough code to get the code to pass, and then you refactor it to make it cleaner. Because obviously the process of making it work, you may not take the smartest single route every time. And looking at it again, maybe at a later date with fresh eyes, you could say like, maybe I could have used a form object instead of 6 process variables here. And we aren't afraid to refactor something, because sometimes there'll be a bug and we're looking at the code, and sure, I could just set this process Boolean, a process variable that's a Boolean to true, but I don't know what that's going to impact down the line. Maybe that variable being true is going to force something to get allocated to an invoice that we don't necessarily want. And sometimes the best way to handle a bug is recognizing that something is bad, it's done poorly. Maybe it was done at the best capacity for the time, but just given these new technologies, it's worth it for our application and for the other developers to refactor methods to use updated 4D methods and wrappers that we've made personally.
We've got a couple questions on the side here, and
Mhm.
you're welcome to either address those directly or anybody who wants to jump into the Hangout and ask the questions directly. Feel free. So Danny said, I'd be curious to know the size of their structure in lines of code and or number of methods.
Sure.
And do they use source code control at all? And that leads into Tim's question about using a 4D server team development. Are you all connecting to a dev server, which I seemed like you were?
Yes, we are. We are all, yeah, we're doing the server team development, connecting to a dev server.
I think we were all wowed by the number of records, but also it'd be interesting to know the lines of code and or methods. Yeah.
I should have prepped this in advance. I know that we have used the term over 1 million lines of functioning code. I mean, excluding comments and blocks removed and uncommented. In terms of methods, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. We can poke through the explore of project methods.
Sometimes if you make a new method, it'll say method number yada yada.
I don't know if this 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 is indicative of number of methods.
12,357.
If that number indicates the number of methods, then roughly 12,000 methods it looks like. And again, some of these are probably going to be unused.
That's a few methods.
This isn't including form methods, obviously, triggers.
Do you use components there for breaking up modules, or is it pretty much all in the main structure?
There are a few components. I'm not sure if I'm looking in the right spot, but I do believe most of it is wrapped up in the main structure.
And also, Tim asked, what plugins are used in the Sweetwater install?
We could take a peek at those. AreaList Pro, we're definitely transitioning to list boxes, but there still are a few AreaLists out there. MyConnect and PostgreSQL, just for connecting to MySQL Postgres databases that we have floating around Sweetwater. The web databases, we have internal time clocking software that the 4D application interacts with a lot. So those come in handy a lot. Those are really the only ones I've integrated with directly, along with the NTK plugin. I don't recall exactly what I use this for. I know I've used the NTK plugin at some point, but those are the main ones. MyConnect and PostgreSQL are probably the plugins I'm interacting with most.
Kirk had a question, and it kind of leads into a couple questions I had. Can you talk a little bit more about the switch mechanism? Sounds really cool, and I'm interested in how your ticketing system links. Directs you to the code that was changed for the ticket.
Good.
I assume the switches are, they're labeled after the tickets, but what about when there's not an actual switch in the code for that ticket? As you mentioned, sometimes there might not be.
Sure. We'll just do a screen share real quick. So every ticket has a unique ticket number. We're at 80,043.
By the way, love the ticketing system.
It's beautiful. Francisco is a dedicated Laravel programmer on site who's constantly working on this, constantly taking in our insight and making it great, not only for the developer but for the end user.
Yeah, looks nice.
So it's great. Every ticket has a ticket number, and that's how we are referencing code changes. So this was our 2284 version of 4D, a ticket I was working on, 37533. we can actually go back into our ticket system and see what that looked like in the past. And this ticket is closed. Me updating the end user with information, automated private comments as to not bog down the end user when stuff actually goes live. But the ticket number is really the only thing relating the 4D code change to the ticket system.
One of the nice things about using your own ticketing system there is there will be less temptation to jump to another one. We've had the instance here at the museum where we had probably 15 years worth of reference to ticketing numbers in one system, and then we got the rug pulled out underneath us, and now we're using another one.
I'm sure, yeah, because we have had internal ticket systems in the past and definitely use third parties, and I'm sure Jason could elaborate more on that. The ticket system definitely been a passion project of his, wanting to get it implemented for years now. But yeah, we did have troubles getting off the ground in that aspect. So if we do a code-based search for that ticket number, we can see all the changes related to that change. This was a hefty ticket. This 37533 was the entire guitar setup wizard. Some tickets might just be associated with a single line of code, a single code change. But if you're doing something that has a far-reaching impact, if you're just adding an audit or a simple alert or making a simple bug fix, it may not be appropriate to implement a switch. But say, just let me find a better example of code real quick. Here's another little UI I'm working on, just a rough cut. But say, as I talk about not using process arrays, say we have this whole functionality to occupy this pop-up drop-down box with values from a list and an array. So we're starting off with making just a pretty basic array, but we want to test functionality of other guitars in this case. So we'll make a new switch, JOL test, though we do, just for sake of continuity, we always try to do the ticket name standard ticket underscore ticket number, just because code changes should be related to a ticket, and there should always be a paper trail, because we don't want undocumented changes going out. If there are issues, we can track it back to the source. So this is a good example of how we would use a ticket in a live environment. Say the initial request is, hey, this drop-down list should only have these 3 options, but they come in later and say like, hey, we actually want it to have a mandolin and a banjo. Then we can add those only for a certain amount of people who need to test it in a live production environment. So say we would come in here. Oops. I would make a new ticket saying guitar setup wizard, add mandolin and banjo. Please do this. And it would make a new ticket number. So we would submit it. It would get sent to me to work on. I would work on it. And I would reference this code change with an inline comment, marking the version number of 4D, the user who did it, just initials. My actual initials are taken by other employees in the company because we've been generating initials for customers since the beginning of Sweetwater. So I'm JOL, not JDL. We reference this ticket number to be consistent. We would put it here. And to make sure this works as expected, we have to put the record, oops, in that table we looked at earlier.
Yeah, I like the switches and the batch system, and in those aspects of the application. Do you know how long that those have been in use at Sweetwater, or?
Oh, no, I don't.
No.
Switches and batch tests have been around since the beginning of time, as far as I'm aware.
Uh-huh.
I would have to ask probably Matt or Jeff to get a better history on that.
And speaking the beginning of time for the Sweetwater application, do you know who the original developer was?
I don't know who originally implemented. I know Joe Lester was he works remote for us now, and he does specifically the our internal time clocking software.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he had a big part in the original implementation, but I don't know if it's any actual, anybody who's still currently part of the 4D community,
Okay.
as far as I'm aware.
Uh-huh.
But a big part of our application today is mostly Matt, Derek, and Jeff, and then all of the recent developers who've gotten involved. But the initial implementation, I'm not entirely sure.
Kirk was asking about the cal chain. Or is that call chain?
Mm-hmm. So that's something we've been working with. That's a way of just tracking all the methods that get called up into a certain point, and those are stored in logs, and that we can access those after the fact. It's just a better way to debug in a live production environment. If somebody describes a symptom that's really hard for us to track down, we can go back into the logs and see, like, okay, this method ran, this method ran, this method ran, and then this error fired.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of having that access like the debugger in a production environment.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like we talked about earlier with the switch real quick, this line of code would only fire if this switch is true. And again, you can set that only for users. And we'll make this true for only Aaron Chandler. I don't know why. And we'll see that line of code will not fire.
That's nice.
Very nice. Saved me many times over.
Yeah, something like that call chain. I mean, I know that 4D has the debug logs, but something in the language that you can extract the call chain would be useful.
And we're still constantly working on that to update it to be as close to that debug chain as possible.
Mm-hmm. Tim wanted to ask if I assume you do have standards for commenting methods or sort of a method templates. I know that we at the museum here use macros to insert the a standard method template.
Sure, as do we.
Yeah.
So I'll find a method I recently made. This is just my dev testing area. We all have our own sandboxes, but I'm glad you bring that up. So we do have a default header where we can set up our incoming and outgoing parameters along with a description and the ticket number, like we talked about here, referenced in the inline comment here.
Yeah,
it's great. So we would have an incoming global name, and this prefixes it with our naming convention, text variables $T, booleans B, the list goes on. That's required. So when you hit OK, I don't want to do it because I don't want to mess up the method. This will all blow out. It'll put the call chain at the beginning and the closing call chain. And then all your functional code goes between those call chain methods.
What was that autocomplete and something else, the two checkboxes at the bottom of that dialog?
Oh, let's see. Word wrap, I believe.
Use autocomplete and word wrap. Yeah, what does that do?
The word wrap, I think, has to do if you use this description. You see these lines up here on the right-hand side.
Uh-huh.
I think it just gives you like, hey, here's how far it'll go and still look pretty. So you don't just have one long comment like this.
Nice.
You want to have all that in one line.
That's cool.
Because there was a time in 4D where you can only have so many characters on a line, correct? Okay.
Right.
That's probably where that one came from.
Yeah, cool. That's a nice little tool there.
Autocomplete, I believe if you have the ticket number highlighted beforehand, I don't know what that one does actually. It might autocomplete the method name because it knows you're already in that method. I'm not sure what autocomplete uses. This was made a while ago, but I pretty much open it up and use it as is every time. And the same thing for just individual lines like this. We have a macro for just an inline comment.
Right.
With the pound sign encouraging you to immediately put the ticket number, because again, we should always be making changes related to a ticket and not be rogue
developers.
So the code is commented. We do have the inline comments. I might be a little overzealous with my comments here. This is mostly for me developing. I'm sure most of these comments were written before I actually wrote the code, and you could see commented out code that I later refactored.
So getting back to your learning of 4D, what would you say would be one of the most important tips or recommendations that one of the developers there at 4D gave you, or you heard somewhere else that really made it click? Is there anything in particular that sort of there was an aha moment that
I really, there was. I had to take a step back, and I had to think about everything in arrays. Like a selection of a table is just functionally, when I program it, I had to think about it as arrays. I know they're not, but just thinking about big lists of data, and they're all related by the same iterator or index, in this case like the record number, and you access them with a specific notation, in this case the square brackets followed by the field. And so just conceptualizing that idea, like, oh, you have a current selection of a table, that just means you have all these fields of, say, the names table that you can access, and you can traverse through those records just like you would traverse through an array. For each, not actually in code for each, but just thinking about it mentally, for each record that exists, say, change the first name to Bob, save that record, and then loop over to the next one using next record. Looping, I know that's not how we would probably do a bulk update. We would probably load it up with an array, do the processing on an array, and then array to selection or a mass update with order somehow. But just thinking about the things in arrays really did it for me, and it was because I don't understand how programming manifests itself in a corporate environment. I didn't know if I was going to walk into Sweetwater and they're going to be like, you're just updating 2018s to 2019s in an HTML document, or if I was actually going to get to using these these concepts that I've been studying.
Oh yeah, no, you you jumped in at the low level, and that's a lot more fun. Like you said, I mean, it's so satisfying being able to provide these kind of even small solutions. Sometimes the simplest solutions are little changes that can have such a massive impact for the users.
Yeah, and also on learning using a list box related to thinking about things in arrays, and probably now I would encourage thinking about things a little more with collections.
Definitely.
But just being able to say, like, here's how I'm manipulating data, and here's how the world sees that data in a list box. Because you can get wrapped up in your own head and overcomplicate things, but at the end of the day, it's columns and rows of data, and you reference those programmatically with the name of the table and the name of the field, not like $AT finance promo ID curly brackets 1. It's thinking about this as data, not just not just arrays out there in La La Land.
No, that's the new command this or whatever. It just provides such nice clarity for collection-based list boxes.
A point I wanted to bring up earlier that I didn't. I had my first computer science professor was amazing. I probably wouldn't have been interested in computer science because of him. My second one, not so hot, and he was really into pseudocode, but learning the pseudocode that was specific to how he wanted you to learn it. So not really pseudocode. It was like learning a fake language to appease this guy. And I quickly found myself developing pseudocode in my head or just writing it out shorthand on a whiteboard or something. I always kind of gravitated to Python. I talked about it earlier. It's what I started off on. It's what I taught a lot of people. But I was quickly thinking in 4D only after just a few weeks of making my own demo applications. And it's because it's easy to, if I'm stuck, I'll just start saying things out like, what do I want to do? All right, well, for everything, all right, well, for each loop. Well, how are you going to iterate through it? We'll probably use a collection. Well, how are you going to access each individual thing of the collection? We got dots now. Collection dot first name. It was super convenient.
So coming from, the outside world, with your experience with Python and other languages in school, I suppose Java and whatnot, now 4D's got dots. What would you think? What else is missing and should be in the pipe for 4D?
Obviously, it's a big topic of discussion because it came up here, but Git integration is big. The question was asked earlier. We do just upload the text code to GitLab. I'm not exactly sure of that process, but we do. It's not a true source control, but all the code, every version, we do a push back to GitLab that we can reference each version of 4D that we release and look at old code. Yeah. And we do actually have macros. Mine aren't set up right now, but we have macros where you can right click, go to the macros, say show version history, and it'll show you straight to the GitLab history.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah.
Definitely have a bittersweet relationship with Git. It's one of those, I don't know. It's like spinach. When they force you to eat it, you'll never want it when you're an adult. Something like that. I totally felt the same way about Git, where I was forced so hard into it through school because they shove it down your throat. Like, you're going to have to do this all the time. You're going to have to do this all the time. And I was working remotely my senior year. Like, you guys don't need version control. We have 4D. But right. I understand that if I'm working on, every now and again it comes up, I'll have to do a code review for a project for somebody who maybe wrote a little script in Python or in a language I'm not so familiar with. Hopefully I want to be doing the code review in that case. But just interacting with version control is both a skill I am intimidated by learning and implementing in my day-to-day, but I know it's super important, and I know it can be satisfying watching those release bubbles and having a really consistent convention on the site and all the analytics and branching. That's a big one, only because it was stressed so hard to me during my education, and then there was almost an absence of it when I was in a corporate environment.
Yeah, well, it's funny. It's something that has been I don't want to say screamed about, but certainly asked for years and years and years and years with 4D, and I'll be very interested to see what the adoption rate is for large projects and for smaller projects even within the community.
Right. And on the, with great power comes great responsibility. If all of our developers have this Git control, there's going to be, probably a higher level of code reviews, making sure we're not, I mean, with the power with Git, I've only really scratched the surface with it, but I would just worry being able to make a change on production. I think we should be, especially with our team, with everybody working on so many things at once, with so many people working on so many things at once, we would definitely have to have a big process change, but probably for the best if we were going to implement it with Git.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a new way to screw up your database.
Yeah, for sure. Because now it's, one of the senior guys doing the structure when we need to, up at midnight, doing the big crossover. And that's, I was a little weary answering the servers with the questions about client server relationships. I don't know a whole lot about the server, unfortunately. Bug fix guy all the way. If you want to know something about service orders, I'm your guy. But a little more than nitty gritty 4D stuff, I'm constantly learning more and more about it every day. And I think Git would be a big part of that, learning about 4D server even more.
One of the things that I've tried to start doing at the museum here for learning and for explaining concepts and whatnot is to make little demo videos. Some of which I've shared on 4DMethod and otherwise just left internal. But I could see as how those kind of videos would be really handy for a team like Sweetwater, where especially if you're bringing in interns, some of the more Sweetwater Sweet 4D trademark.
That's a good one. Might have to take that one for you.
The sort of processes and design, walking through the design and how to update certain things or common tasks. Those kind of videos can really be invaluable.
Yeah, I'll be sure to take a look at those tutorials and point the interns in the right direction. I really appreciate those. And making our own for the future. The only way to make it better is to do it, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it takes time, but then you can just point your interns to that and shut them in a room and
make them refactor my code.
Right. Yeah. Does anyone have any other questions in the Hangout or in online? I am monitoring the YouTube page chat window. If you do, feel free to chat the questions or just blurt them out. Ed's got a question here.
Yeah, I was just going to say it must be a big advantage having worked in the warehouse first and to understand physically the business processes before you have to code them. And that's, I know as a consultant, that was always a challenge going into a new business, trying to figure out what their processes, what the business was before you can actually provide solutions to them.
It was a really cool opportunity being an intern who could offer something to the conversation, because more often than not, you're kind of taking up space. Maybe you're wasting somebody's time. But I keep talking about GearFest, but one of my first projects was doing an update to make sure certain customers should go to a certain location for pickup and notifying the warehouse somehow. We ended up just putting like a little tag on a sticker they were already looking at saying like, hey, this customer is going to be coming through the drive-through, not on foot pickup.
Yeah.
And so I got to sit there and say like, look, this is what's in the mindset of somebody who's working that position in the warehouse. It needs to be right here because they're looking at it. It needs to come out at this time because that's when they're going to be in that location near that printer getting that tag. And it was just something that we wouldn't have found if somebody didn't actually go out there and experience the process. And how could they do that the day of the event, right? So having that insight beforehand while I was implementing these changes was invaluable. And that wasn't the only time. It was just the biggest time that comes into mind.
Well, the only other thing I'd like to say is you need another guitar.
Oh, I would have to drill another hole in the wall. I don't know how the landlords are going to feel about that.
Yeah, you have to start strapping them to the ceiling.
You're telling me the aesthetic is just so good already. I got other walls. You're right.
Well, thanks so much, Joel. And it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
It was great presentation. It was awesome to learn more about how 4D is being used at Sweetwater. It's not only was it a great presentation, but it's certainly interesting to hear about your experience coming into the 4D community. And just like to say thanks again and welcome to the community.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate everybody's time and opportunity, and I look forward to seeing you guys very soon.
On behalf of the 4D team, thank you very much, Joel. Really interesting presentation.
Good job. Yeah. I look forward to GearFest as well, even though I thought I heard Beer Fest, and that's why I signed up. But it's going to be cool anyways.
For the employees, I think GearFest often turns into Beer Fest.
But yeah, so looking forward to the next meetings. You can see the schedule at 4dmethod.com/schedule. We have Will Taylor from 4D doing. Right here. Oh, hey, Will.
Hey, what's up?
So will be doing a presentation called Lights, Camera, Actions with 4D for iOS.
All right.
And that'll be exciting. I mean, there's a lot of progress being made with 4D for iOS. It's going to be a very powerful tool for us 4D developers to be able to crank out these iOS applications at Will. So we'll be excited to see all the new features and have Will go into depth with the tips and tricks on how to make great new apps. Just a little aside, I saw that in the blog, one thing I forgot to mention was there's the pull down the refresh. I will have to take a look at that next meeting.
There is, yeah, and that makes a lot more sense with actions when you
Yeah.
do actions. So yeah, it's great. But yeah, we'll go through it all.
Cool. Yep. So there's open dates on September 4th and November 6th. So if anybody has some ideas or would like to jump in the ring and show off what they're working on, please contact 4DMethod and we'll talk about the presentation and get you on the schedule. So thanks again to everybody who took part. This meeting went a little bit long, but it was great. Any other questions or discussion? Feedback is always appreciated. Just reach out and contact 4DMethod. And also beyond just taking part in these meetings, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/4DMethod. There's some nice little bennies in there if you'd like to contribute. So thanks everyone, and good to see you all at the 4D tour. People I saw. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next 4DMethod meeting.
Thank you, Brent.
Okay.
Thanks,
Everybody.
All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you.